going to deep delve into the situation. Joining us live from Taipei, political analyst Ross Feingold is here. Ross, thank you so much for sparing your time and joining us here on A News. We have been talking about...
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, we have been talking about the China's framing. It's the military modernization of the part of the resisting Western influence. So what would you say about that? Do you think that it is going to work, or do you think it's going to get stuck as an opinion and nothing else?
Of course, Xi Jinping, in his speech and through the military parade, wants to show the world that China is a major power, although the content of this speech might talk about a multipolar world and no country should bully other countries and everybody should work together. This is, of course, about demonstrating China's strength. And it's also about firming up China's relationship with Russia. And that's why Putin is there. And it's clear that China is not going to change its relationship with Russia simply because of criticism from the United States. That relationship has been ever since the war in Ukraine began, and China continues to buy large amounts of Russian oil, for example. So I don't think there was too much surprising from the speech or even from the parade, notwithstanding that new weapons were shown as well. Those weapons would be shown at some point, whether in military exercises or through other methods. Again, this is about one of the world's great powers demonstrating that it is a power.
Well, let's talk about the extent that China relies on Russia and other partners in countering Western alliances like NATO. What would you say about that? Do you think that it is possible that they're going to depend on it for a while, or are we finally going to see a shift? I mean, the shift is happening in the world, but are we going to see the concrete messages that comes from that shift to finally being in action?
Certainly, with some of President Trump's policies, there's a lot of doubt about the strength of traditional alliances, most notably NATO, groupings like the G7, the interest or desire of the United States to work with organizations like the United Nations. And of course, Trump has already announced that the U.S. is leaving the World Health Organization. So the strength of multilateral organizations and alliances, I think it's a legitimate question to ask what the future of that is going to be. But even with some of Trump's skepticism towards those organizations, we still see that the traditional friends and allies of the United States continue to maintain their desire for the United States to serve that leadership role. So when it comes to defense issues or when it comes to trade, we see that many countries, the traditional European friends of the U.S. or countries in Asia like South Korea and Japan, they want to maintain that strong relationship with the United States. Now, that's not going to stop China from trying to create alternatives. And there was that meeting that you mentioned of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization over the past few days. There's BRICS. But none of these organizations have really proved that they're viable alternatives. If they're not a free trade agreement, for example, then they're not an alternative to other trade agreements. They're not multilateral defense agreements, for example. So there could be a lot of talk about alternatives to the U.S. leadership, but we're simply not there yet.
Well, let's talk about China using the forums like BRICS and, as you have mentioned, Shanghai Cooperation Organization to resist the Western norms. As you mentioned, again, we're not there yet, but do you think that this kind of forums are finally going to be the reason that China resists to such things and it is going to work out in the global situation? Because we know that the Chinese president is going to meet with Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, and so many attendees is going to be there. Probably the Iranian president is also going to be there. Slovakian president is also going to be there. So the stance is clear, isn't it, Ross? The stance is the fact that those parts of the world are going to unite, as we have seen in the West. Now the East is taking the same action. What would you say about that?
Again, I think the reality is a lot of countries around the world are still going to look for U.S. leadership. Now, there's the traditional allies of the U.S., like Europe or Japan, Australia, Canada. And then there are a lot of countries in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia United Arab Emirates, the countries in Southeast Asia, they want to be friends with both the United States and China. They'll participate in initiatives launched by both those countries. For example, Trump went to Saudi Arabia and got a lot of business from them. They were very eager to buy United States products. They have a strong military relationship with the United States, but at the same time, they're increasing their business ties with China as well. So we see a lot of that around the world, but it doesn't mean that countries are really taking a side. And specifically, we're other than a few exceptions, maybe like Iran or North Korea, very few countries are saying we're going to take China's side and we're going to reduce our relationship with the United States. That's just not happening yet.
Well, what role do you think the Global South plays in China's resistance to Western hegemony, in that opinion, then?
That's a great question, because historically, the Global South looked to the Soviet Union during the Cold War era, or it looked to India in many cases, as well as China, to provide alternative leadership models, alternative trade partners. Often those relationships came without criticism about things like democracy and human rights, which sometimes comes from the United States. But we know that the Trump administration, by their own statements and actions, they're no longer looking to be as critical about human rights and democracy issues in the Global South. So there might be some new opportunity for the United States to build that relationship, and specifically Africa comes to mind. But China has been making a lot of moves in the Global South over the last 15 to 20 years. Often very successfully, a lot of investment, helping to build a lot of infrastructure. Chinese companies very active in mining and natural resources in Africa, for example. So the United States has to play catch up. And that's really going to be up to President Trump. Is he going to take a personal interest in the Global South? Frankly, in his first term, he wasn't as interested. He didn't visit Africa in his first term. So we'll have to see what kind of personal interest he takes in the remaining 3.5 years of his presidency in the Global South.
Well, looking at that too, could China's this resistance, and when you compare everything that we have spoken about so far, is it going to lead to a new Cold War, as you have mentioned, or is it pushing for a systemic reform instead? Or, and a third option, is it just going to die down as it is because it has been going on like this for a while? But it is different this time, isn't it?
Certainly in the defense space, I think it's fair to say that we're in a situation very similar to the Cold War. China's making massive investments in its military, improving its capabilities, and we saw that today with the parade, whether that's land, air, sea, drones, cyber, and they're going to keep doing that. And the United States is going to respond, and it has been responding with additional investment in defense in the Asia-Pacific region, for example, in Guam, in Hawaii, encouraging its partners like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, as well as Taiwan, to invest more in their own defense. So when it comes to defense issues, we're really in a similar situation to the Cold War. What might be different and is still unknown, because the U.S. and China are still in trade negotiations, is what will be the nature of the U.S.-China trade relationship. And certainly when it comes to trade, the U.S. and China are far more intertwined than the U.S. and the Soviet Union ever was. So there are certainly some differences with the Cold War era as well. And even President Trump said, when asked by reporters a couple of days ago about the military parade in China and U.S.-China relations, he said they need us. He indicated that he remains open to doing business with China.
And that takes us to thinking that President Trump is actually really going to feel that he's just away from the good optics. We have been talking about it with the other diplomatic and commentaries. So what would you say about that? We have been saying that with especially Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Xi Jinping being together, and President Trump, rather than just putting tariffs after tariffs, would actually feel like he's missing a great opportunity for the optics, because he thrives on optics. This is his style, isn't it? What would you say about the Trump's approach that is going to happen in the probably in New York in the UN General Assembly, do you think that he's going to try to take the world attention to himself again and probably just make an amendments with the parties and the wars and also have a great business deal with the other countries? Or is it going to be a full-fledged Cold War situation?
To be fair, President Trump, if we look back to his first term and now some of his actions in the first 6 months of his second term, he's not looking to have wars around the world. He's focused on trade. He wants more opportunities for U.S. businesses to export American products. And when it comes to difficult relationships like North Korea, he was open to meet Kim Jong-un in his first term, even though no deal resulted. But he said he's willing to do that again. Obviously, he met with Putin. He's been trying to arrange a ceasefire in Ukraine and Russia. And he's talked about the other peace agreements that he's helped facilitate, like Azerbaijan and Armenia, or the DRC and Rwanda. So he's also clearly has his heart set on winning a Nobel Peace Prize as well. And the way to win the Nobel Peace Prize is for President Trump to continue to try and be this facilitator and a deal maker, and not to increase tensions around the world. So it seems that he's setting the tone for his second presidency, that he wants to be the guy who brings people together.
Well, thank you, Ross. Thank you for sparing your time and thank you for answering my questions here on A News.